What is going on, everyone? Soliday Holiday here, and today we are continuing our Zero to Hero Keystone Master Challenge as a Retribution Paladin. In the previous episode, we reached our goal of getting to Keystone Master, and I asked at the end of the video if you guys wanted to see more, and you guys absolutely destroyed the like and comment goal that I had set. So, because you guys wanted to see more, we're going to keep going, at least until Keystone Hero. In this episode, we actually complete our first 20 Mythic dungeon, and we advance our rating a whole lot. If you've not watched prior episodes, the rules for this challenge are pretty simple. I will not be trading any gold or anything else from other characters. I have removed this character from my Raider.io profile, so that way no one can see my mains rating or anything like that, and I will not have any help from friends or guildmates. At the beginning of this episode, we have a mythic rating of 2026 and an item level of 467. And we're going to start out this episode just like we start out every single other one, with that good old weekly vault. From the vault, we had an option of a Zealous Pyronite Warplate. This was a 480 item level chest piece and was a 17 item level upgrade for us. This was also our first chance to have a mythic piece of gear. To top it all off, it was a tier piece of gear, so we would not have to take it to the Revival Catalyst. We also had the option for an Abalone Plate Armor, which was a 476 chest piece. So as you can assume, it was a pretty easy choice for us. So we grabbed our first piece of mythic gear, and boy did this impact our overall item level. We gained a whopping 1 overall item level, which put us at 468. We did end up getting an 18 rise from the vault, and the affixes we're going to be dealing with this week are Fortified, Afflicted, and Raging. So before we got into our first mythic dungeon, we had some crest left over from last week, and we upgraded our helmet to 476. We also upgraded our brand new chest to 483, and this put us at an item level of 469. We then got into a plus 16 fall. On the first pull, we pulled some pretty good numbers and got up to 500k DPS. And I'm not gonna lie, we probably could have done a little bit better with the rotation and done a whole lot more numbers, but one of my goals for this episode, and just this week in general, is to use our utility a little more effectively. So I was a little too focused on the group and watching the health rather than my rotation and making sure that the group didn't dip down too far. This was my first time playing Afflicted as a Ret Paladin, and honestly this is the first time that I've been able to do anything to assist the group on Afflicted. I was honestly doing my best to clear the Afflicted souls. Towards the end of the dungeon, I feel like I got it down pretty well. Also, deadly boss mobs screaming souls at me when they popped up was also a huge help. I attempted to use my Lay on Hands ability to save the tank's life, but sadly I was unable to get it off in time and I actually just wasted the ability. After the tank died, that led to an almost full wipe. We ended up dying, but thankfully the rest of the group was able to finish the pull, and after that the boss went down very smoothly and we were able to continue on. So going back to how I mentioned that I wanted to focus on our utility, right? I did a whole lot of preparation for this week. We made a bunch of macros for our abilities to make life a little bit easier on us. I should have honestly done this a long time ago, but you guys kept calling me a dummy in the videos, all that kind of stuff, so this helped me to try to get this accomplished. So what we ended up doing is we made a mouse over macro for our Lay on Hands. If you do not know what this allows me to do, is it allows me to just hover over the character or the portrait on the side and cast the ability on the person. We also made a mouse over macro for the Blessing and Protection and the Cleanse Toxins ability. I also made a macro for the Final Reckoning ability. So what this does is it allows me to cast the ability immediately where my mouse is located. I don't get the big green circle that I have to click on anymore. I will say that there is definitely an adjustment period with using this macro. There are definitely a couple times that I throw the ability off to the side and I barely hit the group because I'm not used to it and I didn't position my mouse correctly. For all of you guys that have been here for previous episodes, you are going to be extremely proud of how much I use my ability and my utility as a paladin for this episode. I did run some heroics just to test out the abilities and everything was honestly working great. It was also a little fun to see how much freaking damage I did in a heroic dungeon and how quickly we made it through that dungeon with me as geared as I am. Another small housekeeping thing is that we worked really hard to clear out the error that we kept getting in our previous episodes. We went through a bunch of settings, disabling some, keeping others, all that kind of stuff until it seemed like we fixed the issue. I do want to say a serious, huge thank you to everyone that left a comment and attempted to help me fix this issue on previous episodes. Without you guys, I would not even have known where to begin, so your help was monumental to try to fix this. Anyway, back to the dungeon and the gameplay you guys clicked on this video for. On the trash leading up to Manifested Timeways, your boy used Blessing and Protection for the first time ever. Sadly, the monk still died. I don't know why the monk still died because you can see the ability on the character and you can also see that it was now on cooldown. So if anybody can help me understand what happened here, I would greatly appreciate it because I finally used the freaking ability, right? And the player still died. And I was just like, what the heck? I was big confused. We then continued on to the Manifested Timeways. As you guys recommended, I ran the opposite way and it worked out a whole lot better for me. It was so much easier to dodge the balls of horribleness running counterclockwise. Moving on from the manifested time waits, good gosh, it's been a long time since I've been in the fall dungeon. I completely forgot the ads leading up to the third boss freaking hurt. So I was able to use my defensives and my heals to try to help the healer out so that way we didn't wipe. While fighting the last boss of the dungeon, the monk absolutely popped off and was doing some serious numbers for a single target fight. I also didn't know this, mostly because I've never healed before, right? But I had no idea you had to watch Chromie's health on this fight. So during this fight, the Warlock pointed out that Chromie's health was getting a little low, right? And I helped the healer heal Chromie back up. I will say I wasn't a huge fan of how I played this dungeon. It was my first dungeon back for a minute and I felt way out of practice. I was also really focused on trying to use my utility, so I wasn't doing the best DPS. But we were able to kill the boss and that added 73 to our rating, which put us at a total rating of 2099. From the chest, we actually got Zealous Commander Cuffs. This was a 463 wrist that was a 6 item level upgrade for us. Also, this was a champion piece of gear that was replacing a veteran wrist, so it was a pretty good upgrade. After we got back to Valdrakken, we upgraded our beautiful chest to 486, but it didn't change our item level. After this one, we attempted to get into dungeons for I don't even know how long, but it felt like forever. So we didn't get into one, so we just created our own for our 18 Rise. While making this group, the tank that applied was a pretty high mythic rating and item level, but he was grouped up with the mage. The mage had a super low item level, but his main's rating was pretty high, so I accepted them into the group. Once we got in, the first pull of this dungeon was extremely hectic, as it always seems to be on Rise. But even with all the hecticness and my small brain trying to comprehend what was going on the screen, we were able to do some okay-ish DPS. On the second pull with the Sentinel, I used my lay on hands to heal the healer like a boss. I told you guys you'd be proud of me. After we killed the Sentinel, I will say is that I liked the route the tank took for this run. By the time that we were all done with the trash leading up to the boss, Tyr had already spawned and was ready for us to fight, so it worked out great. Other than the group seriously lacking on the orbs and the mage dying from damage, the fight went pretty smooth. I know that you guys have heard me mention that I made a bunch of pro gamer moves and whatnot throughout this series, but it did take 3 attempts for me to make it through the big hallway with the orbs, so I'm going to remove that pro gamer title until I can make it on the first try again. I did almost die on the trash in the big circle and I had to use lay on hands on myself to stay alive. I could have just shielded, but you know, that's not the point, alright? I used my ability. Be proud of me. We were able to make it to the time lost battlefield. I got the mortar put on me and I learned from last time I don't want to use my bubble if I don't have to. So as I was running him away, my dummy self got stuck on this staircase thing right here, so I had to bubble to save myself. 2 people from the group ended up dying during this fight and had to run back. After the tank got killed, I accidentally pulled the next phase of the fight due to my concentration still being on the ground from when I was attacking one of the suicide bombers. I did end up dying, so I had to run it back before they started the actual boss fight. I will say, I don't know what Blizzard is feeding these monks, right? But they have been popping off lately. They're just going ham, right? This monk pumped some serious numbers on the boss and was one of the main reasons why this dungeon went so smoothly in the first place. Morchi then went down super easily and we quickly moved on to the final boss. As we were running to the boss, we almost got sent off the platform and then we almost full sent one of our buddies off by running into one of the orbs. After thankfully making it to the last boss with no issues, I did use my lay on hands on the tank a little preemptively, but I just wanted to make sure that we didn't wipe. I don't know if it was just because I was so worried about him or what, but I then almost killed the tank by trapping him next to the cave wall and dragging my swirlies into his escape route. Thankfully, we were able to kill the final boss and finish this dungeon. I don't know if it's this series or if it's just because I'm recording or what, but the monk died right as the final boss did. At this point, I think it's happened every episode. I have no idea what's going on, but it is definitely a trend for this challenge. But we did end up adding 34 to our overall rating, which put us at 2133. The luck was with us this week. We got a pair of 467 item level hands. These were a pair of Greaves of Parallel Lives. These gloves were a hero piece of gear and they were a 3 item level upgrade for us. After we got out of that dungeon, we completed our final upgrade for our chest, which put its item level to 489. This brought us up to a 470 item level. The next dungeon we delved into was a 17 Throne of Tides. As always, we got to pump some serious numbers on the first pull. At this point, I felt like I was getting pretty used to Afflicted, and honestly, I was pretty proud of my ability to clear it out. It also felt really good to be able to assist the group in a positive way during these dungeons for this affix, and I felt like I was really contributing to the group. We did end up using our lay on hands on the tank in the pull after the water elevator, and then the shaman got absolutely demolished during the fight. Thankfully, the tank cleared out the entire room before the first boss, so I didn't have to worry about making a fool of myself during the second boss fight. We then made it to the Nazjar fight. While fighting the boss, I had to use my lay on hands to save the heals from an early demise. I know that I've mentioned the fact that I've been using lay on hands and the utilities a lot in this episode, and I know that I continue to do it after this. But a lot of people pointed out to me that I would more likely complete a lot more keys and have a lot more success in dungeons if I start focusing on my utility more. And honestly, I completely agree. One of the reasons why I included a lot of the times that I use the ability and all that kind of stuff this episode is that I want you guys to know that I am listening to you and I am trying to improve, right? I mean, I know I'm improving, but it's super slowly, but all that matters is that we get better, right? After killing Nazjar, we moved on to the good old commander. I actually used the pillars of the walls on this fight, so that way I wouldn't get knocked back into the air for super long time with each knockback, so that kind of made me feel like a boss. Thankfully, this group was awesome and we were able to move along with the dungeon super smoothly. I will say is on the trash leading up to the Mindbender, I got pulled in by one of the Watchers and got one shot by the ability. I haven't gotten killed by one of these in a long time, and I think it's because I tried to run the opposite way instead of running back, which I never do. I was just trying to position myself in a better position, but I just didn't make it in time. I did attempt to use all my defensive for the Flame Shock ability like the good little paladin I am on Mindbender, and I did have to throw out the lay on hands to keep the tank alive. After that, I got super close to dying, but thankfully between me and the healer, I was able to stay alive. And then I'll tell you what, is we made it through the next hallway with no deaths. I don't know if I've ever made it through this hallway with no deaths before. I was freaking blown away when we did it. And at this time, I did notice that my Blessing of Protection was not working for the dungeon. I tried tweaking it in between runs, but it just was not working at this time. So at a later time, I'm gonna have to freaking figure out what's going on with that. We were then able to kill the final boss with no problems, and that added 77 to our total rating, which put us at 2,210. We then upgraded our ugly face healer to 480, or what you beautiful people that are gonna like and subscribe call a helmet. The next dungeon that we did was a 16 Atala Dazar. On the first boss, Razam, we tried to walk to the pillars so that way I could break line of sight for his Zephyr ability, but I was being a little lazy and I didn't use my mount ability, and I figured I could get there on time, right? Well, we most definitely did not make it. And directly after that, the tank got gobbled up by the big old chicken, and we tried to use Blessing and Protection on macro on him, but it still was not working. And also, I don't know why this is happening, but the error that we were dealing with started popping back up. I did notice while I was editing and all that kind of stuff that it's only popping up for specific dungeons, so hopefully I'll be able to narrow down the issue and fix it. We then went right towards the Priestess. And I know you guys gave a lot of good reasons to go this way instead of heading towards full call, and I get it, I do. But dang, do I much prefer the other way. While we were fighting the trash leading towards the Priestess, I noticed that having the mass over macro for my cleanse for the afflicted affix was freaking awesome. It made it so much easier to deal with and so much easier to cast this ability and get back into my rotation. So this is my message to anyone that does not have a macro for these kind of things. Take it from me, learn from my experience, right? Spend 10 minutes figuring out how to do it. It will make your life so much freaking easier. We did end up having a couple deaths on the way towards the Priestess, but no wipes, so I'll consider that a huge win. On the Priestess fight, the first ad, I messed up, right? I used my stun on the wrong ad. We did eventually kill it, but it did consume 2 pulls before it died. So when the next transfusion happened, I hit my bubble to make sure that I didn't die, and thankfully the rest of the group could hit their transfusions and all that kind of stuff, and we could continue on and kill the Priestess later. So on the Screamers, just after the big circle in the middle of the dungeon, we ended up getting feared, and one of the Paladins actually got feared to the edge of the bridge and fell off. I honestly didn't see them fall off at the time until I saw them running up the stairs just a couple minutes after. We then killed Volkal and continued on to Yasma. So the tank started the Yasma fight before everybody was inside the tank area, and thankfully the last pally was able to make it in right before the gates closed. That being said, he did pull a Screamer, so the Screamer ended up getting pulled into the boss area, so we were fighting that along with the boss. A little bit later on in the fight, a group of Soul Rends made it to the boss, and after we killed them, the Screamer did their Scream ability, and we all got feared. I, like the good little paladin I am, used my lay on hands to heal one of the other paladins. I then almost died because I ran over a spider like the dummy I am, and then I guess I decided to not learn my lesson from a few minutes earlier, and I ran straight into another spider. I honestly didn't even see this one, and when I did try to move, it was just too late. After that, they had to waste a battle res on me, and we were able to finish the dungeon. This added 72 to our rating, which put us at 2,282 overall. As we were leaving this dungeon, you say the classic TY and GG, all that fun stuff, right? I don't know if I had a small stroke or what happened, but I apparently forgot how to type, and this nonsense was broadcasted to the whole group. I don't even know what this was. It was supposed to be TY and GG, but it didn't come out that way. After this dungeon, I apparently was on a macro creating spree because then we made a mouse over macro for our flash of light ability. With our new and improved macros and all that fun stuff, we went and upgraded our helmet to 483, and it was at this time that I remembered that we had the Mark of Mastery that we got last episode. So we went to the Emerald Dream and we used our mark to get a pair of 473 Zealous Pyre Knights Elites. This was a hero piece of gear and a 16 item level upgrade for us. This also brought us to an item level over all of 471. And as of right now, the only thing that we really need to replace is our 447 back. After this, we got into our first freaking 20 mythic dungeon. We got into a plus 20 Dark Heart Thicket. And the best part about getting into this one, this is the last dungeon that we needed to get a plus rating on all of our dungeons for both affixes. I was super excited, right? I was super excited, super prized to be in our first 20. And while we were waiting for the group to fully form up, we changed our transmog. The transmog's not the best, but hey, I wanted to change it up for a bit. On the first poll, we actually did some pretty good numbers, but dude, this hunter freaking popped off. This hunter was super close to hitting 1 mil DPS on this poll. What the actual heck? I didn't even know that was physically possible with this. I don't even know. I was lost for words. I was honestly flabbergasted. I guess that's what you can do when you actually know your class and you can actually use your cooldowns effectively, right? So as we were moving on through the dungeon, I will say is that I haven't been playing my main due to pretty much entirely focusing on Paladin and editing videos and all that kind of stuff. I've been pretty much focusing on this challenge solely. So I haven't been running high-end dungeons lately, and I forgot how much longer mobs live on Fortified, especially in higher dungeons. It felt like some of these pulls took like 6 years, and I felt like I wasn't doing any damage at all. On the 2 bears before the first boss, the tank put a skull on one of the grizzlies, and I honestly didn't see it at all, right? This almost led to a full wipe. Your boy ended up dying, and by the time that I did come back, they had already taken care of business. The first boss then went down super smoothly. We were at the bottom of the damage meters for DPS, but honestly, your boy was just happy to be there. I was just trying to help in all the ways I could. I was just happy, right? I was just happy to be here. On the next trash, I ended up getting and I mean absolutely obliterated to a mushroom. I think this is one of the first times that I've actually gotten hit by one of these mushrooms. I didn't know that this was a one-shot if you walk into the AoE area. I thought it was just a damage over time, but hey, you learn something new every day, right? Also, looking back at it now, I really need to start using my Blade of Justice before I use my Judgment to activate my 4-set. I don't know when I started or why I started using my Judgment first, but I need to stop doing this. The group then did an awesome job of interrupting all the dwellers. Normally, whenever we fight these mobs, everyone gets feared like 2 or 3 times at the very least, right? I think only me and another person got feared the whole time, and I was honestly super impressed with this group. We then continued on to the Oakheart fight. I got the throw ability placed on me where Oakheart throws the tank at you, and I used my shield ability so that way I would take no damage. While we were continuing the fight, I threw my lay on hands at the hunter, and they went and got one shot immediately after I healed them to full. So I battle res them, and we continued to kill the boss. So after Oakheart went down, we continued on to the next trash. While fighting the next mobs, we ended up dying and we actually had to end up running back. Then for whatever reason, whenever we rezzed, it said that we were still in combat, so I couldn't use my mount and I had to run all the way back. I saw that we were going to have to wipe for this one, right? For this poll, I knew that we were going to have to wipe, so I stayed back. For some reason, they still registered me as in the fight and they aggroed on me, so I just went ahead and kamikazed my way in so that way we could reset. After we reset, we went into the next boss and we skipped the blood thing, so that way we didn't even have to deal with it at this time. While fighting the third boss, I did have to lay my hand on my chest due to almost dying, but other than that, it was a super easy fight. After we killed the third boss, I started to worry if we were actually even going to be able to complete this dungeon on time. I knew we had a good amount of trash left before the final boss and still had the final boss fight. As we were moving on through the trash, the hunter ended up dying on the last group before the boss, and I had to lay on hands to the tank. But we made it through the trash and started the last boss with 2.5 minutes to go. And I'll tell you what, this hunter was nuts. This hunter went crazy on his DPS and thankfully was pumping some huge numbers. While fighting the boss, due to me having the large pool on me, I had to stand back and attack from far, so I was just throwing out my abilities left to right. And I was just throwing them from afar, just trying to do everything that I could. As we were continuing the fight, the healer did end up dying, so we had to res him. And with 18 freaking seconds left, we killed the last boss. I'll tell you what, during this fight, my music had stopped, everything. I didn't notice. I was so freaking focused, just trying to do everything that I could. I was ignoring everything around me. From the chest, the tank ended up getting a 470 back, which was the Cloak of Fading Echoes. And God bless America, sometimes I freaking love people. The tank didn't need it, so he traded it to us, and it was a huge freaking upgrade. This was a 23 item level upgrade, which brought us up to 472 item level. Once we got out of there, we went ahead and upgraded our belt to 480, which brought us to 473. After this, we kept trucking right along, and we got into an 18 Waycrest Manor. I will say is that the first pull of every dungeon is just like so much fun. You get to crank so much good DPS and then pop your cooldowns and just go absolutely ham. As we were fighting, the hunter then started to show us up in our DPS, right? So what we did is we focused up. We went absolutely ham, and we did everything in our power to beat him in the DPS race that he didn't even know we were in. Sadly, he still beat us, right? But you know, I tried. That's all that I can say, right? The sisters then went down super easily as always. But on the poll after the sisters, everyone was participating in the DPS race, and we lost once again. On the Goliath fight, we blessing and protectioned ourselves out of Soul of Thorns like you guys have been yelling at me to do for weeks now. After the Goliath fight, we stayed in the courtyard and we DPS downed a whole bunch of pulls. I got very close to pulling some extra mobs in the courtyard due to avoid the silencing bell thing, right? But thankfully I didn't go full dummy on this one, and we were able to continue on to the Raw fight. So as we were fighting the Raw fight, I just have a question for any of the Ret Paladins out there, right? Just curious, do you have any recommendations for single target rotation? The Ret Paladin AoE is super easy and it goes hard, but I feel like I fall off like crazy on the single target fights. I know that I could do better about using my Final Verdict instead of Divine Storm, but sometimes I want to use Divine Storm to help the heals out a little bit, healing. But is there anything else that I could be doing better on? Is there anything that you guys recommend? I would greatly appreciate a comment or any tips or anything like that. I also know my DPS was not the best for this episode. Don't get me wrong, it's not horrible, and I could definitely be doing worse, right? But I was really focusing on really trying to use my utility and defensives better for this episode. I feel like I really accomplished my goals, especially how many times I've had to say lay on hands during this episode. But I'm going to try for the next episode to pull everything together, rotation, utility, and all that kind of stuff, so that way I can really focus and try to become the best paladin I can be. After we killed Raw, I'll say that this group was really great. We were able to continue on and kill the final boss without any issues. I wish I could tell you more about what happened, but the rest of the dungeon was honestly super smooth. But after we did kill the last boss, we still sadly had 1 freaking percent left. So we had to go to the beginning of the dungeon to finish it out. This was a huge learning moment for me because I did not know that you could do this in Waycrest Manor. If you didn't know this and you need enemy forces after the last boss, you can just go talk to this person instead of hitting the portal at the top, and it will return you to the beginning of the dungeon. Once we did that, it added a 45 to our total rating, which brought us up to 2,444. We then went to the upgrade people and upgraded our belt to 483. And if you thought we were done after that dungeon, you would be wrong. We then got into a 17 in Taladazar. As soon as we got to Razan, I landed directly on a freaking raptor. And I'll tell you what, I'm super proud of my ability to, not walk into stationary pools of death, right? I'm super proud to say that I can avoid the stationary pools, right? But I walked directly into this one. I messed up on this one, all right? Before we got into this dungeon, I actually did some work and I was finally able to get my Blessing of Protection macro working. Finally figured it out, got it taken care of so that way we didn't have to worry about it anymore. The reason why I know it works is because the tank got gobbled up by Razan. I threw the blessing on him like the mythic raider I wish I could be, and he lived. Then, as we were moving along on the fight, the monk almost died. So I went and I laid my hand on his shoulder and I told him it's going to be all right. Thankfully, the monk was so inspired by my words, we were able to kill Razan and move on super quickly. And I know I should get used to it at this point, right? But we sadly went towards the priestess, and we did have a good amount of trouble heading this way. We had a couple people die because we just kept pulling more and more mobs and we ended up wiping. We then went up the stairs and we pulled a big group, and then in classic Solly Holly fashion, I pulled extra mobs. I did it. I know. I fully expected at this point. We should just clear out everything at all times. Just warn the tank, hey, clear out everything. I'm going to pull extra. I know I am. After we pulled the mobs, we ended up wiping and then we reset. After the reset, we went through and we killed the mobs at a little bit slower pace and we were able to make it through. Thankfully, there were not shades to have to worry about, and we were able to make it to the priestess with just a couple more deaths. We then killed the priestess and made it to Volcall with no issues. But I'll tell you what, is the Volcall, the totem phase was a rough one, and it was on me. I blew all my big cooldowns in the fight before, so I was really struggling to DPS down my totem. The tank ended up coming over and assisting me, but thankfully they all went down at the same time and we were able to kill Volkal. But it was a rough one for a minute, I'm not gonna lie to you. We then completed this dungeon, 2-chesting it, which added a whopping 4 to our total mythic rating, which put us at 2,448 overall. And if you thought we were done, you would be right. We are ending this episode with a item level of 473 and a mythic rating of 2,448. Also, if you guys are still freaking here, I greatly appreciate you. Everybody that watches these videos, I appreciate the heck out of you. Thank you guys so much, and I'll see you on the next one.